Open the committee, Ray.
Sorry about that. We'll start over. Good morning, Chair Peterson, committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss this amazing new technology. And I know this reference will likely be lost on some people. We're not quite at the Jetsons age, but we're pretty close. So it's very exciting. We'll get back to the slides here. Sorry about that. We're here just for a very basic briefing to give you an introduction about emerging aviation technology. Can I get a hand with the slides? This briefing is just an introduction. We just wanted to let you know what technology is available. Thank you. What technology is available, and more particularly what the state is doing. We often get, Kansas should be doing something about this technology, and we are behind the scenes. We haven't made any flashy announcements or many flashy announcements, so this is just an introduction to emerging aviation technology. I do want to highlight some strategic partners that are here today. With us from the Kansas State University, Mr. Kurt Caraway and Travis Balthazar. From Wichita State University, Pierre Harder. From KDOT Division of Aviation, in addition to myself, Ray Seif, the Director of Aviation, there's also Brian Casson from Aviation. We also have an intern. She won't be saying anything today. I frightened her earlier saying she's going to have to give the presentation, but Arthi, this is her second day. We haven't managed to scare her yet, so hopefully today won't do it. And then April also from the Department of Commerce. Now, looking at emerging aviation technology, it's important to look at the state stakeholders within this space. This shouldn't be a place where KDOT Aviation is, first and foremost saying this is what the state needs to do. This shouldn't be a place where academia is leading the state. This shouldn't be a place where commerce is leading the state. We really need to have a centralized strategy. So several of these state stakeholders, the various agencies and academia, formed an emerging aviation technology working group. It's roughly 2 or 3 dozen members that are comprised of state agencies rather. There's academia, there's industry that's there, there's also utilities, municipalities, airports, basically all the stakeholders that either have something to gain from it or have some kind of effort within emerging aviation technology. Within this larger group, we have a breakout group. Several of those members are represented here today. These are the members that are actively engaged in trying to get technology together to enable commercial operations, and they'll discuss their part here shortly. So this is the state's AAM, or Emerging Aviation Technology Strategy, or vision rather. We'll discuss what AAM is here shortly, but basically to maintain Kansas's leadership in emerging aviation technology by creating a dynamic ecosystem to enhance connectivity, drive economic growth, expand transportation access, and improve quality of life for Kansans. That's what's guiding our strategy moving forward. So emerging technology, we can break it up into a few groups. There's small and large drones, for instance. Anything that is up to 55 pounds or less than 55 pounds is classified as a small drone. Regular drones or unmanned aircraft systems are classified as 55 pounds or over. There's a lot of technology that we'll discuss and a lot of acronyms and abbreviations, so please excuse that right now. We'll do our best to discuss that. In addition to drones, sorry about that. Go a little bit back here. But in addition to drones, there are emerging or advanced air mobility vehicles. One of the things that I wanted to highlight here, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see Lucas Koch at Kelly Hills. I'd love to call him up here if it's okay to discuss that particular drone and what they recently did with it. Lucas?
Thank you, Ray. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Lucas Cook with Kelly Hills Unmanned Systems. In a little while, we'll cover what Kelly Hills does, but we wanted to highlight an event we had last August. So the Pika Pelican there is a company that builds this large drone, the largest drone ever approved by the FAA for commercial operations. They build it in California, and we're their sole U.S. customer, and we've been kind of tagged as a commercial launch partner to help them commercialize that in the United States. It's also the largest agricultural application drone in the world, and so exciting things happening in Kansas.
Thank you, Lucas. On the bottom right-hand corner there, you see a product that's made by Textron. So this isn't just far-fetched technology. This is technology that has a Kansas connection. That is the Textron Nuva. So we talk about advanced air mobility. You'll hear that term, AAM for short. You'll hear regional air mobility. You'll hear urban air mobility. These are all terms that we're giving the next generation of aircraft, and how we use those terms basically depends on the transportation problem that they're solving. But for the most part, advanced air mobility, regional air mobility, urban air mobility, it's just the next generation of aircraft that typically tends to be either electric or hybrid. It can take off like a regular airplane, or it can take off like a helicopter. It can take off in a short distance, and there's a lot of terms associated with the way that these take off: vertical takeoff, short takeoff and landing, or conventional takeoff and landing. So the regular airplane we term as conventional. We, again, looking for a lot of terms to make it sound a lot more complex than it is. We see on the right-hand side there some of the leading manufacturers. There's Beta Technologies, there is Joby, and of course, again, Textron, our in-state OEM, is represented there with their Nexus platform. We want to make sure that everything that we talk about here, we feature Textron as much as possible, because they are actually the gem that Kansas has. These aircraft typically incorporate some form of automation, and they are quieter, they're better for the environment, they can help fill transportation voids that are difficult to fill any other way. You see some of their characteristics here. They are going to be simpler to maintain. So in the future, it'll be easier to maintain these aircraft because they have simple systems, and they'll be quieter, they'll be less expensive on an hourly basis. So what form of transportation are these intended to replace? And the short answer is really none. It's supposed to be a multimodal component, and it'll fit in within air and transportation needs. It's not intended to replace anything, but just enhance our multimodal system. Now, if we can think back to when electric vehicles came out, as soon as electric vehicles came out, they were really stymied by the lack of infrastructure. There weren't many fast chargers if you were going cross country. You literally had to wait, plan out your course, and you had to wait to see if you can get a charger to go across the country. Same thing with emerging aviation technology. With these aircraft being electric or hybrid, they will heavily rely on infrastructure. They'll also rely on an ecosystem, not just the electric chargers. If they fly into an airport, the chances of having that airport have a maintenance shop that knows how to maintain them is fairly slim. So in order to take a look at this technology, we need to take a look at the entire ecosystem. Everything from integration to the airspace, into the infrastructure, into the operations and what it would take to enable those operations, to regulations. The FAA doesn't even have some of the licensing required to fly these aircraft or maintain these aircraft. So they are emerging technology, but we need to take a look at the entire ecosystem in order to have those be viable within the state. The state is currently undertaking an AAM, or an emerging technology roadmap, that will take a look at implementation throughout the state and what we need to implement the technology throughout the state. It'll take a look at it'll provide a market analysis and an economic impact study. Now, it's very important that we take a look at various use cases throughout the state and engage with several stakeholders throughout the state. So we do have a consultant, the MITRE Corporation, that's undergoing or completing the roadmap study, and they are reaching out to those various state stakeholders to understand their specific desires within the space and their initiatives, and MITRE is going to develop a statewide implementation roadmap. It's a multi-year plan. If you can imagine, some of the ecosystem that we need to build out can't just be like a flip of a switch. It takes several years to develop. So this is a multi-year plan, a phased plan on what we need within the state in order to support these types of activities within the state. It'll also take a look at the market analysis and take a look at the economic impact of either implementing the technology, or alternatively, if we don't implement the technology, what missed opportunities do we have? That study should be out Q4 of this year. The basic priorities of the study is to enable operations and ensure that the infrastructure is there and the minimum service levels are available, or at least understanding what those minimum service levels are, to connect stakeholders and to foster economic and workforce development. These are some of the roadmap objectives listed here for you. Basically, just trying to understand the various users, trying to connect users, trying to understand the processes within the implementation that are vital to implementation, rather. Listed for you here are also the various categories that I mentioned, from small drones to large drones to advanced air mobility vehicles to unmanned advanced air mobility vehicles. I don't want to get into the weeds with this too much. This slide is available for your reference, but I just wanted to showcase that each one of these will have its own certification requirements, from pilot, from those who can fly or maintain. It'll have certification requirements based on the specific operations. And some of those are still being, the requirements are still being developed right now. At this point, I'd like to pull up Brian Casson from the Division of Aviation to discuss operational limitations for you.
Good morning, everyone. A central hallmark of this new and emerging aviation technology is the notion that the individual operating it isn't in said aircraft. That is a situation that's never existed before. We've always been able to note, see, and avoid. Everyone here drives a vehicle in all likelihood and has been able to avoid collision or catastrophe if they're able to see it and steer around it. Frankly, yesterday it happened with my 4-year-old in the car. Another vehicle ran a stop sign. He commented, "Ooh, that's not legal," but I went ahead and I hit the brakes and avoided it. Clearly, when you have uncrewed systems, you have a limitation of being able to see the aircraft by the operator, and since the individual isn't in said aircraft, there has to be a proxy for that. Currently, we're able to do that with exemptions and waivers with FAA, but we need to come up with a technological solution that allows a substitute for being able to have the operator see something that's an obstacle and deconflict it by avoiding it. That is the central hallmark of what this technology really requires. It's a system of systems versus one individual being able to avoid catastrophe in off-nominal situations. So as far as that's concerned, there's enabling infrastructure to go ahead and help with these capabilities. And I'll allow Kansas State University to discuss some of the items that they have.
Ryan, would you state your name and the title for the record?
Brian Casson, Chief of Strategic Plans and Programs, KDOT, Division of Aviation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Kurt Caraway. I'm the executive director of the Applied Aviation Research Center at Kansas State University, located on the Salina campus. Wanted to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives we're taking with respect to enabling infrastructure that Brian alluded to. At the Salina Airport, we're working with the Salina Airport Authority to develop a test site capability so that manufacturers can come in and test their UAS or AAM technologies, particularly for uncrewed or remotely piloted operations. So in order to be able to do that, we need to be able to bring in some instrumentation for the detect and avoid component, which is the baseline. It's going to be a ground-based radar system that will allow those operations. What we want to be able to do is to use that as a mechanism of providing core oversight for safety assuredness. But then the manufacturers will have onboard detect and avoid systems that they'll be validating in our test range specifically for takeoff and landing types of operations in a terminal environment. And so there's, I think, a lot of exciting things that are happening in that regard, and we're trying to build out that capability. You may be aware that Textron eAviation has recently announced that Salina is going to be their location for a lot of their flight test initiatives. That's going to be in conjunction with the Airport Authority at Salina. We're going to have a role in that, as well as Wichita State University and that's NIAR component. Also, this is probably a good time to talk about some of the great initiatives that are happening with a rather large test site that's operated by Kelly Hills.
Thank you, Kurt. Lucas Cook, CEO of Kelly Hills. We also have a need for this type of beyond visual line of sight equipment, the radar equipment, to help us solve these challenges, mainly focused in agriculture and firefighting industries. So we are, my parent company is Heinen Brothers Agri-Services, one of the largest privately held crop dusting companies in the United States. It is pivotal that we figure out the safety use case for using large drones, such as the Pike I talked about earlier, in our industry, because new pilots are few and far between, and obviously it's one of the highest death rate jobs in the United States. And the safety case for us is to put the drones in very dangerous spots and put the main aircraft in kind of easier, more open, and frankly, better paying areas, and use the drones and automation to make it a safer airspace for everybody. Part of that is figuring out the beyond visual line of sight environment, as why we're kind of all here together, kind of trying to do a full court press here for the state of Kansas. So next, I'd like to invite up Pierre Harder to talk about the initiatives NIAR Works is doing as well.
Thanks, Lucas. Pierre Harder, Associate VP for Research and Industry Engagement at Wichita State University. So we're also doing quite a bit of work in this area for a variety of different companies and government entities. Our National Institute for Aviation Research, NIAR, has a variety of different labs. Many of those support advanced aerial mobility and unmanned aircraft systems, from material testing all the way and through flight testing. So our NIAR Works lab handles flight testing, experimental modifications, maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and certification activities. So we've got quite a bit of lab space dedicated, big hangars. We're also building, it's shown on the screen here, a restrained flight test facility. So before these new aircraft are taken into flight test, they do what they call tethered flight testing. So they keep them tethered to the ground to test out how they behave in ground effects, so very close to the ground where the wash from their propellers affects their stability and control, and then out of ground effects testing. So we're building one of those. It'll be operational later this year. Textron will be our first launch customer in that, and then once they complete that flight testing, then they untether and they'll go up to Salina and do their flight testing. We have a variety of other companies, some of which Ray showed you earlier. Many companies from across the nation are coming to Wichita and then Salina as well, to have us help them in their design activities, to help them with certification, help them with flight test, and ultimately to get passed by through the regulators. I think I go back to Ray at this point, or Brian, sorry.
As I alluded to before, this technology isn't just an aircraft, it's a system of systems. And to go ahead and allow this to happen, we need detect and avoid to be able to know what is where and how it interplays with the airspace and other actors in it, also to include the ground population risk that it exists. But another part of it that really needs to be noted is this has to be managed. And part of that management involves communications for the pilot and for other aircraft for vehicle-to-vehicle communication, But a really central, important part of this is this new and emerging aviation technology doesn't use the same powertrains that have been used in the past. Often this is electrified, so an inventory that is available and adequate of electrification to power these aircraft is also part of the need that really exists in this space. Being able to go ahead and understand that it's a layered approach that involves system of systems is paramount to understand. Our neighbors in other parts of the region, notably North Dakota and Oklahoma, have already gotten into this space, particularly in the detect and avoid ability to see these aircraft and deconflict the airspace, because that's really what's necessary to get in the air and do advanced operations with FAA. However, what I really want to emphasize is while other states have gotten involved in architecture, particularly for detect and avoid with ground-based radars, we took a deliberate and intentional perspective not to go ahead and be the first into the breach. Rather, we were deliberate and allowed others to go ahead and invest their money, and we were able to sit back and frankly be the smart money and see the lessons learned. What does our regulator have an appetite for? And then we can go ahead and seize that opportunity and not have to go ahead and pay a premium to be the first into the breach. It's frankly how you finish the race, not how you go ahead and begin it. And while it's not always the best for a press release perspective to not be the first into the breach, frankly, the smart money is a Kansas-sized approach and a right for Kansas approach. And that's really what we're advocating here with KDOT and our partners, because every one of the stakeholders brings a particular acumen and, ability into this so that in collaborative work, we're able to do what is a Kansas appropriate solution set. And to that end, not all the use cases are going to be the same. In Kansas, this isn't going to be very likely the same as what is seen in the Northeast corridor with high population densities. In Kansas, so much of this is going to be public safety focused. Again, the calamities on both of our coasts, and Kansas is at all no stranger to off-nominal disaster events, particularly for weather. This technology allows a force multiplier for our public safety organizations to bring assets and capabilities to save property and people faster. And to that end, I'll like to bring K-State up here because they have a unique perspective when it comes to public safety in the state of Kansas and nationally.
Kurt Caraway again. Thank you, Brian. At K-State Salina, we've been working with public safety agencies for a number of years now to bring this UAS or drone technology into their toolkit. There are a lot of implications for enhancing safety of the officers that are involved in our first responder force, but also to the public. There, as an example, we're starting to see an influence of different departments across the nation that are doing drone as a first responder, in which the drones are dispatched to quickly get to the scene so that the police officers, as they're arriving, will be more informed in terms of the scenario that they're getting into. In some cases, the decision may be made that they're not even necessary, they don't even need to respond because the situation may have diminished. Those are the types of things that we're working towards. But from a more practical perspective, just bringing in different officers and training them into different applications such as search and rescue, so that they can have these vehicles in their vehicle, they can have the uncrewed aircraft vehicles in their cars with them so that they can try to quickly get an assessment of what's going on, to really help them make a more informed, safe response. And we continue to do that. An example, last year at the State Fair, we partnered with the Highway Patrol. We had some funding from the state and from the Federal Aviation Administration to provide overwatch so that if there was a call that somebody was in distress, whether it was a medical situation or law enforcement situation, we could provide quick overwatch and share what that imagery looked like, what the video looked like to those who were arriving on the scene so that they could be much more effective in their response. So those are some examples of some of the things that we're doing with UAS, and we're also doing some of that with the firefighting community as well.
Lucas, can you discuss precision agriculture with us, please?
So as stated before, Kelly Hills is a privately held business. Our business model is to commercialize very large drone systems. So as they start to get through R&D and are trying to make it into the commercial environment, that's where we fit in. Ultimately, this is bringing better ROIs down to the farm gate. So it's important for farmers and agricultural businesses in the United States and specifically the state of Kansas. I think an important piece here, and the reason we have decided to come together as a group and forming a unified front for the state in this advanced aviation technology is everybody plays an important piece, important role in these commercial operations. A unique thing about Kelly Hills is we found ourselves in a position where we're helping guide companies worldwide. So we are interfacing with ag technology companies in 6 different continents. And when they come to Kansas, they really like it. They say, oh, wow, we're surprised. And we say, what did you think? You're going to come here on a parachute and, not be able to get back home? And these companies are very much wanting to get into the United States agriculture market, and they're building fascinating tools. And furthermore, they're looking for a place to call home inside the United States as they grow their businesses. So an important piece here is Department of Commerce and the ability to interface with those companies and talk to them why Kansas, which is historically the air capital of the world, can also be the air capital of the world for the next generation of aviation. So,
When we, as we segue into some of the other use cases with advanced air mobility, the package delivery and high-value cargo are some examples of that can be done with either drone technology that's going to continue to expand or advanced air mobility, which are the passenger-size carrying capabilities. And with that, there's going to be implications for rural transportation as well. With these advanced air mobility aircraft, generally what we're seeing is ranges of about 200 miles before they have to be recharged. When you think about what that could mean for Kansans, that's bringing communities closer together. It's making the larger airports more accessible, because we also expect that with this technology that we're going to see cost of operations come down. And so this will bring air as a viable option to ground transportation alternatives in certain types of scenarios. The next area that we want to talk a little bit about is some of the research and development initiatives. We heard Ray talk about how the Federal Aviation Administration is still working to catch up on a number of areas. One of the things that's really exciting is that they have a UAS Research Center of Excellence for UAS and Advanced Air Mobility. There are about 18 core universities that are part of this consortium. It's really, I think, important to highlight the fact that 3 of those 18 come from Kansas. So KU, Wichita State, Kansas State, we're all a part of that, and we're all involved in active research that is helping to make recommendations for airworthiness certification standards, for the vertiport or airport infrastructure standards, and pilot and maintenance certification standards. So those are some very exciting opportunities where we're already doing a lot of coordination and collaboration within the state of Kansas, and there's a lot of opportunities to continue to do that. Pierre, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Kurt. So this is a quickly evolving area of technology. So there's a lot of companies, over 100 different companies that are trying to bring their aircraft to market across all these different use cases, whether it's personal transport, whether it's package delivery, whether it's the search and rescue. So lots of different companies doing this. Most of those companies are not in the state of Kansas, but they are coming here to do a lot of their research and development because R&D leads the way to all these technologies. So I think we're uniquely situated as a state and with our academic institutions and with our other resources in the state to support those companies on their path to certification. So a lot of work has to be done in this area, but it's quickly evolving. And shortly after that R&D cycle is done, then we talk about manufacturing, we talk about production operations. So we see ourselves also uniquely situated to woo these companies here to set up shop not only to do their design work, but to also build their product here in Kansas. But to operate those things, there's a lot of other work that has to be done. So Kurt mentioned the work the FAA is doing in here on how to integrate these aircraft safely into the National Airspace System. Last year, during the FAA's reauthorization bill through Congress, Congress authorized them to set up a Center for Advanced Aviation Technology. And the goal of that is to help the FAA understand what it's going to take to integrate all these aircraft into the National Aerospace System. They put out an RFI late last year. We did respond back to that RFI with this team as a makeup to respond back to that, because again, we do think we're uniquely qualified as a state, and we're definitely have the right resources where we can check all these different boxes for all these different type of use cases, whether they're rural use cases or urban use cases, or those use cases that go between the two. So again, we believe there is a lot of R&D going on. R&D leads the way to getting that technology certified, but we need a lot of infrastructure in place, and that's part of what we're trying to do with this roadmap, is really line out all those different assets that the state needs to bring to bear to bring these companies to this state to do business and to enable these companies to operate in the state safely.
Wanted to leave you with a couple of other thoughts. So I've recently attended a couple of aviation conventions, and while I was there, I took the opportunity to meet with a few of those OEMs that, we've highlighted earlier, and, talk to them about what we have within the state, and they seemed excited about, the potential. They're already operating somewhere else. They've shared their needs with us, and we're sharing those with our strategic partners. But while I am having those conversations with those OEMs, I guarantee you someone's having those same conversations with Textron here. So we definitely, we are focused on getting business into Kansas. We definitely also want to, as a term from my youth, dance with who brung ya. We want to make sure to support Textron, our in-state gem of an OEM that's within this space. So this conversation, they're partners of ours as well. We're all communicating and trying to share a statewide strategy to that end. So with that, I'd be more than happy to stand for questions, either myself or any of our strategic partners.
Committee questions, Senator Otterbright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Lucas. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I appreciate this. Lucas, the programs that you're talking about with the drones and agriculture, are you connecting with high schools that already maybe have a program or that want to have a program to build up the interest in our youth and the rural areas that have a very direct interest in your topic?
Great question. We have interfaced with Highland County Community College. So they do their kind of remote campus where they help high schoolers through the junior and senior year. So we have interface there. And we're doing an event at the end of this month at Jackson Heights High School. So we are engaged to a small extent to kind of, yeah, exactly as you say, inspire, right? To show them that you can do cool things in Kansas and you can do cool things in rural areas of Kansas too.
Thank you. In our rural areas, our children have a more direct path to dad and granddad on interest levels, more so than we do. And I know there's interest out there in the wide scheme of things that all of you are talking about in our rural areas. So appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can say one thing to that, KSU does a lot with drones and drone education and outreach as well. So does WSU. Prior to my position, I was an airport manager, and they have both participated in outreach events where they will showcase the technology, and they have various educational efforts aimed specifically at the technology, at getting our youth into aviation. We do have various grant opportunities with the FAA to go after workforce development. And this year, the FAA allowed for drones to be part of that. So they're looking at pilot development, maintenance development in drones or UAS technology. And we do have schools that went after that for grant funding. So we cherish aviation within the state. We have a focus on getting our next generation into that. It's one of my passions, and I know it's WSU and KSU and really everyone our passion as well. Thank you.
Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For anybody, can you guys speak to the volume of SBIRs and STTRs that you've been receiving or are trying to get right now? And maybe also just kind of the capital in this sector that has been raised so far in Kansas?
I don't see too much, at least from Wichita State perspective, not too much in the SBI or STTR. But those are relatively small and small startups. Most of the people that we support are you know, at the OEM level. So most of the work that we're seeing done beyond just what we're doing with the FAA, sure, that those are federal funded dollars, but most of the work that we're doing is through individual companies. So it's industry funded research. So it's companies like, well, we've talked about it publicly. So Beta and Joby, for instance, have come to us to do work on crashworthiness, and we've done drop tests of batteries, and a variety of other companies come to us for all different kinds of needs. So it's mostly, I would say mostly industry funded, at least at Wichita State.
And I think that's really good. So, yeah.
If I could just to expand on that a little bit, our observation has been the same with the SIBRs and SITRs. One of the challenges is the lack of standards, and so it makes it very difficult for some of these smaller companies to be able to take their technologies and then be able to introduce it in a way that's compliant with the Federal Aviation Administration so that they can go out and charge fee for service for those. That's one of the reasons why the FAA research is so important. And one of our specific research focus areas is to help enable the commercialization of the UAS. And so that detect and avoid component that we talked about earlier, that's super critical. Obviously, the Federal Aviation Administration has the unenviable responsibility of promoting safety in the skies. And that's nothing to be underestimated. It's incredibly critical that the systems, if they're going to be operated remotely or autonomously, that they have the ability to do so in a way that further enhances but not diminishes safety. And so the FAA, frankly, is grappling a little bit with how do we come up with standards for that so that we're not compromising the most critical asset.
For anyone, has there been any standardization coming around for the electrical requirements for the vertiports?
So that is in the works. For vertiports, the FAA just released information that they will be an extension of or the next generation of heliports, essentially. So there is some guidance. There's an advisory circular that is coming out. It'll be treated just like a heliport. There is some information there. For electric needs, honestly, we mentioned infrastructure needs. What we've shared with the 144 now public airports within the state is have that conversation with your utilities so you at least understand your available electric. The DC fast chargers that some of these are going to likely need may be on the verge of a 1 megawatt per unit. So that's a lot of power. Each airport, each community needs to understand their electric needs for now into the future. And understanding that electric need doesn't have to have anything to do with emerging technology. They need to understand that for their own use, but then it could also put them in a prime location or prime position to enable that technology when it's available.
And while you're up there, as you're sharing with these folks that are coming in testing, are you promoting the educational capabilities that the state has for like WSU Tech and all the people offering the 107 licenses and?
Every single opportunity I get. So we have a lot of unique opportunities within Kansas. We have a lot of great ingredients from academia, from research and development, from the test sites. And our first hook that we try to set for these outside OEMs is, telling them, we're not interested in pulling you into the state. Of course, that's a little white lie, right? But we tell them that we want to understand their needs so we can create a pipeline to their workforce, a pipeline to their pilots and their mechanics. And we hope that, that starts the conversation. They share with us, and they have shared with us, what those needs are. Now we can start working on creating that opportunity for our next generation and our workforce. And once we create those opportunities, we'll look attractive as a state.
Senator Clem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, I think, goes to Lucas. So it's my understanding you have a test site that was approved by the FAA. Could you give us a little color on that, as well as maybe talk to what you see as advancements or where Kansas might be going in, from your perspective?
Sure, of course, yeah, happy to. Yes, so our test range was approved by the FAA. So the uniqueness of our situation is that we're privately held, a company outside of Seneca, Kansas, so 7 miles south of Seneca. And we are interfaced with the FAA on 3 programs as a private company, which is very rare. And the way we have been kind of building that out is interfacing with the research and development capabilities of Wichita State and Kansas State. And to that end, we had a annual field day. So we decided we should really showcase all this technology and kind of show really the United States and the world what Kansas has been up to. And so last year we had WSU Tech and Aviation and Kansas State Salina, Kansas State Ag, all were there present. And the idea is to kind of leverage their expertise and our expertise and vault these companies into a real commercial standard for safety and commercial ROI for farmers and ag retailers. And the range itself is the largest contiguous FAA test range in the United States. So it covers parts of 4 states, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Iowa. Obviously headquartered in Kansas, and that's nearest and dearest to our heart. So,
May I layer onto that question? So, mostly your space is large craft. Is that a fair statement? From a smaller craft standpoint, we've historically, I come out of the business world, so we play in that space for supply chain, ag, security, from a small craft perspective. So do we have Kansas, and historically we've had a relationship with Oklahoma State, so I'd be impressed because I'm a Kansan too, play in our own state. So that being said, do we have smaller players that would play in that space today from a company perspective that you would recommend? It's more of a personal question, just curious.
So smaller drone companies that I may recommend. Boy, there are lots, but top of mind, there's one in Kansas called Tesseract. So that's a local one. And then small drone US companies, kind of out of my realm. Kurt?
It's no worries. That's just fine. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Committee, further questions? See none, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Keep us informed. I think we'll have to have you back next year. With that, committee, no further business. We are adjourned.